Goals are deciding what you want and writing it down. Say that again. Decide what you want, write it down. It's the best tool for helping you reach whatever desired future you're thinking about. Decide what you want and write it down. A plan is usually several goals written in some way, whether it's on a sheet of paper, document of some kind, a PowerPoint, whatever, that can be communicated to somebody else. Once you understand what you're trying to do and everyone's clear, then everyone can start working toward the same objectives. That's the power of a well-written plan. Historically, plans have been 20, 30, 40 pages long, a lot of detail, a lot of suggestion on what's going to happen, when, and so forth. While that may still be appropriate in some situations, more popular today and probably moving forward are short plans, a one-pager, 2 or 3 key ideas where the big ideas are spelled out, but everybody else is expert and expected to know how to fill in steps 1 through 10 as opposed to spelling them out for that individual person. A good plan is kind of like an operational manual. I often ask, why do the French fries taste exactly the same no matter which McDonald's you go to? Think about that for a moment. And the answer is because they've standardized how they make the fries, how long they cook them, at what temperature, how long they salt them, where the fries come from, and so forth. And so in those instances, they're so clear that they figured out a process to get from A to B. But in most things in the world, we don't have a process. We have to create it because it's not defined yet. So that's why we need goals. We basically outline what our operations are going to be, and then we start working toward accomplishing those ends. The process of setting goals is not something that happens by chance. I like to think of it as a funnel technique that gets more and more specific as you move down. To start, whether it's in business or personal goals, we start with a dream. And by a dream, it may be aspirational. A dream may be aspirational, or it may be general or a vague idea of what you're trying to accomplish. I want to be more successful. I want to have a great product. I want to be able to accomplish or solve a particular problem. This is a dream. So one of the best things you can do is start with the dream. Once you have a dream, which is the general direction of what you're trying to do, the next step is to look at the values. Values are the things that are important to you, and the basic message with values are, if your dream and coming after it, your goal, aren't connected to values that you care about, it will make it virtually impossible to accomplish them. For example, if your value is to spend time with your family, yet your business is requiring you to travel constantly 5-6 days a week, those two are incompatible. So we've got to consider, what do we really value as we're starting to establish more specific goals. Then the next step is going to be create what I call an attitude statement. This is a little bit more specific. To be happy, to make money, to send my children to college, whatever it's going to be, it's a general statement. The problem is a lot of people think that's a goal, and it's not a goal. You have to be more specific. So then we actually get into where we write a goal. And the goal is something that says what we're going to do, when we're going to do it by, and so forth. So we're going to launch this product by the end of the first quarter, and we're going to achieve number 1 status within a particular market by the end of the fiscal year. That would be a goal. We could measure that as a deadline. That's much more specific than to be successful or even a vague thing to have a product of some kind. Once we get the goal, then we move to the action steps. And what are the action steps? Those are all the details that are going to go behind accomplishing that goal. It's almost like there are 50 or 100 or 500, however many you have, mini goals with their own little deadlines. And so if you did each one of those, it would be virtually impossible not to be successful and reach the broader goal. All right, then finally what? We get the results. Once we do all of the steps, we accomplish that bigger goal. And so a plan then is going to be a number of these goals with a number of these action steps. Let's talk about each of these steps in a little bit more detail. A fun exercise for you to do is to sit down and write your dreams. Get out a sheet of paper or a tablet and just start putting them together. You'll find that you can create 10 to 15 of them very quickly. If you're going for 50 though, it takes a little bit more time. And it may be things, if you're early in your career, like to start a family, to have a house, to get a good job. These are all things that could be on there. Maybe when you're older, it'll be things like to retire comfortably, to downsize the home, to own a yacht, whatever the dreams are, that's fine. The point is you don't worry whether or not you're able to accomplish them at this point. You don't worry about where the money's going to come from, where the time's going to come from, or anything like that. Instead, what you're trying to do is get these things out of your head and on a sheet of paper so that you can look at them from time to time. And that whole process starts to make them more real, and subconsciously your mind will start thinking about those and working on them. The next step would be to look at the values. And I like to do what I call a values clarification exercise, where there's a number of values. Some of the values, for example, could be to be happy, to achieve eternal life, to start a family, to be successful, to be financially secure. These are all different values. And nobody's saying one is necessarily better than the other. The question is, what's important to you? And so the way I like to do this is to ask folks to go through these and find 10 or 15 of the top values that are most critical to them. When I ask them why, what they usually say is because if I have that, other things are taken care of. If I have a good personal or good family life, then other things in my life are going to be good as well. Or if I have enough money, other things in my life are going to be good as well. Then what I say is, all right, get rid of some of those. Get them down to 3 values. Maybe you can come down to your top value. And that's a very difficult process for some people. But basically what you're going to do is find your line in the sand. You're going to draw that line and say, hey, where are we not going to take it anymore? We're defending this. We're getting ready here. We're all the way there. That's my number one value. And that's where really strong people will not compromise. They have their values and they stick to them. Next, we look at attitude statements. Some personal attitudes might be things like to be happy, to make money, to start a family, to buy a house, to buy a car. Those are all fine. In business, it could be to hire the best and the brightest, to make money, to turn a profit. What's the problem with these statements? They're too up in the air. To be happy, what does that mean? To earn a profit, what does that mean? If we want to set a goal that we can actually accomplish, we have to get more and more and more specific. Consider this. The attitude statements, which are just the general part, I'd say they're abstract, they have no deadlines, they're difficult to define, and they're difficult to measure. The goal is going to be the opposite. Here's a good example. To increase sales, that's the attitude statement. What's the goal? To increase sales from $50,000 to $80,000 a month by the end of this fiscal quarter. Now we've got something we can count. Now we've got a deadline. That second goal is more concrete, it's defined, it has the deadline, it's easier to measure. That's essentially the secret to effective goal setting, is getting specific. Some people say that a good goal should have 5 things. It should be SMART, and SMART is an acronym of what the goal should include. So, first of all, it should be specific, as we've been talking about. M, it should be measurable so we can count it. A, it should be attainable. It's not so ridiculous that somebody will never get it that they give up. So we call that a stretch goal. It may be just a little bit outside of our reach, but we don't make it so crazy we know we'll just give up. R, it should be relevant, which is it's tied to something that we care about or that we're working on, that it's going to benefit us. And then finally, time bounded, that's the deadline. So if you're thinking about, is my goal any good? Ask yourself, is that goal SMART? Go through each of those 5 metrics and see if it's measuring up. Once you get a goal that's clearly written, or an objective, it starts to take on a shape and has some elements. It usually starts with the prepositional phrase to, which we've talked about. Then it gets into a desired state or a desired set of accomplishments. It can be verifiable. Others can look at it to know whether or not it happened, or you might have a video camera or something to show or prove that it was actually done or happening. It includes a deadline. It has a detailed action plan. It's quantifiable. In other words, there's numbers included somehow, some way around it. And it can either focus on outputs, which are how much you're doing, what are you trying to do, or outcomes, what is the impact of what you're trying to do. Output is, I put a website together. Outcome is, I sold $100,000 worth of product through my website. The website was done, we got the result. The output outcome idea is a very valuable one. In fact, it's great for setting business goals. Let's look at a couple outcome goals to start. What if we said to send one news release to each of the community's major media outlets, print, TV, radio, by May 10th? Well, that would be something we're going to do, so that's an outcome. Or here's another one. To deliver a presentation to the XYZ conference in each of the following cities: Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Kansas City, Omaha, and Denver. If you're not familiar with the Midwest, those are some Midwest cities. Again, did we deliver the conference or did we not deliver the conference or the presentation? Those would be output. Outcome, on the other hand, could be of several different types. First one could be information. Here's an example. To increase awareness of our event by 10% among all segments of the community during the month of May. So that's knowledge. They know about it. Maybe we do a before or after survey to find out how many people now understand what's going on. The second could be attitudinal, which is how people think about things. For example, we create favorable public attitudes toward our new plant location by increasing the percentage of people who support it to 45%, up 10 points from 35%. So that 10-point gap would be an attitudinal change we could look at. And so it'd be kind of a 1 to 5 scale or something like that, not just a yes-no awareness. And then behavioral, we could look at either a survey or some other metric, but here's an example: behavioral. We're actually trying to change behavior for an outcome. To encourage 30% greater usage of seatbelts by the end of this summer campaign, measured by a statewide poll to track changes in reported behavior and assessments of the number of accident victims reported to be wearing their seatbelts. That's one of the things that police officers track. If you have an accident, they ask you, were you wearing your seatbelt? And that's part of the recording and printout. There may be other stats. So that'd be an example of using a couple different measures to try to track the outcome of what happened with our campaign. So yes, we had the campaign, that'd be an output, but what impact did it have? That would be the outcome. Once we get a goal established, the next step is to build an action plan. Those are all the detailed or mini steps that get us from point A to point B. And so a simple spreadsheet is often very effective for this. Put it in 2 or 3 columns. What's the step? Who's doing it? What's the deadline? Could be as simple as that. Maybe color code it or put numbers in front of there so you can table sort it and select it and so forth. That's what a lot of organizations will do to really kind of track the details of what's happening, when it's supposed to be completed, by whom, by when. Now the great thing about plans, which is typically more than one goal grouped together with the action steps and so forth, communicated in some format, is that we can use predetermined categories to put them together. For example, in a marketing plan, you could start by describing what the current situation is. You could talk about what positioning you're going to try to use for the product or campaign. What are the objectives? Those would be the specific goals. What are the strategies? How are you going to reach those goals? Is there a push-pull or a pricing strategy? What is it going to be? There's who's the target audience? What are the key messages? The actual stuff that you want to say in your campaign. The tactics. Those are all of the different things that you might use, whether it's a consumer campaign, B2B, or professional services. What are all the different ways in which you're going to communicate those messages? What's the timetable, the budget, and then how are you going to track or measure marketing return on investment? Those could all be elements that are put together to create a marketing plan. If we look at a strategic plan, which most businesses have, and they create these for the overall organization and then often for each division and so forth, these are very popular with senior executives. So what's a strategic plan? It's usually the mission statement. What's the organization trying to do? Then there's a vision statement about their future. What do they want to have, do, or become? They talk about some of their key values or core values. Then they list a handful of specific goals, and underneath each goal they list a few key action steps. Now that strategic plan may be a more generic document, but then what ends up happening is somebody is responsible for helping accomplish goal number 1. They'll take that and then they'll really go through and develop a very strong and detailed action plan and figure out how to implement it. So that strategic plan was basically a general guideline that the executives put together that then other people in the organization are expected to further implement. If we look at proposals, that would be another type of plan. How are we going to put the work together? How are we going to build the product? Could be things like maybe a cover letter, a title, the contents, imagine a booklet of some sort, a summary, a description of the situation. What are the objectives? What's the methods or approach that they're going to be using? How are you going to track results? What's the timeline? Who are the team bios? What's the budget? And if there were any references. Those are things that often go into a proposal or a plan of how you're going to do the work. And then finally, you might just have a business plan for like a startup or something like that. That could include things like a situation, the objectives of what you're trying to accomplish, who's the management team and what are their qualifications, what are the different products you offer, the different services, what's an analysis of the market, what is your marketing plan. Notice we already talked about the marketing plan, but it could be included as a chapter or subsection in this. What's your manufacturing plan if you're doing that, and then what are your financial projections? Now, of course, you can create any other topics you want, but when you think about a plan, this is what we're talking about. We get the very specific goals, we get the framework around it, so somebody that doesn't understand or isn't familiar with everything that you're thinking about can read that and quickly get a sense of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. That's the beautiful part about setting goals and building a plan.